Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
My wife saw me with my cousin, thinking the wrong thing. She decided to do the inevitable. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. No man will ever be able to understand women. Believe me, if a man tells you that he understands women, there are only three options. He is mistaken, he is a liar, or, in fact, he is not a man at all but a woman. When you work in an office at a large firm that develops and sells educational software, the days aren't all that exciting. Believe me, I enjoy my job and I'm good at it, but exciting is not a common word to describe my workdays. However, one particular Friday in September was quite unusual. Firstly, at about 10 a.m., I received a call from someone I had not seen for almost 20 years, Ari Landler. Ari and I were second cousins, and we grew up on the same street until I was 12 when her family moved to the West Coast. We hung out together all the time, riding bikes, playing frisbee, and kickball, typical childhood activities. Although we had completely lost touch over the years, I was glad to hear from her. "Tommy, are you one of those fitness freaks who eat yogurt while working out on the machine, or can I buy you a real lunch?" I laughed. "How about an extremely fatty, guaranteed to clog your arteries cheeseburger with a big order of onion rings?" I picked her up at the Hyatt off the highway, where she was staying for a 2-day business seminar, and we spent a wonderful hour eating our burgers and just reminiscing. Like me, Ari was happily married, although unlike Lisa and me, she and her husband already had several children. I oohed and ahed over her photos. We swapped stories about the joys and challenges of married life and overall just had a wonderful time. When I dropped her off at the Hyatt, we hugged and kissed tightly and made solemn promises to keep in touch more closely in the future. I told her that Lisa and I were hoping to take a trip to Chicago next summer, and we would definitely meet Ari's family. For most of the day, I smiled to myself, looking forward to telling Lisa about my pleasant encounter with the woman who was such an important part of my childhood. But at about 5:15, all thoughts of Ari were completely pushed out of my head. The fire alarm in the building went off, and people groaned all along the corridor. We decided it was a false alarm, but when Hank Thomas shouted that he could smell smoke, we hurried out of our offices and headed for the stairs. We were on the 9th floor, but everyone knew to stay away from elevators. On the stairs, we encountered a panicking secretary who was coming down from the 11th floor, screaming and crying that her colleague had fallen, broken her leg, and could not move. Hank and I headed to the 11th floor, where we found an overweight, middle-aged woman sitting on the landing, sobbing in pain. Her leg was sticking out at an odd angle, and her ankle was starting to swell. We asked her name and calmed her down a bit, then Hank and I together picked Irene up and carried her down the stairs. When we walked out of the fire doors, we were happy and relieved to see an ambulance and 2 paramedics waiting for us, ready to take Irene from our arms. Several colleagues gathered around to congratulate us, and a few minutes later, the fire crews, who were already on the scene, extinguished the fire. The fire started in the copy room on the 6th floor, apparently caused by some thick-headed idiot throwing a cigarette butt into the trash. It's hard to believe, but you can never go wrong betting on human stupidity. When I got home, Lisa was in the kitchen preparing a salad, and I smelled something like lasagna in the oven. "Smells great," I said, walking up and kissing the back of her neck. "You won't believe what I did today." I was cheerful and relaxed and barely noticed that Lisa's face looked tense and drawn as she turned to look at me. Thinking about it later, I realized that she had been crying. "About what?" she said, trying to smile and looking a little less miserable. She sat down at the table and looked at me intently. "Something unusual, of course. I'm a hero, well, me and Hank," I continued to tell her the whole story. Of course, lunch with Ari completely slipped my mind. When I finished, I expected a congratulations, a kiss and hug, or a joke about my heroism, basically anything. Instead, Lisa just looked at me. "And this is your news today? Is this what you wanted to tell me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and without another word, she jumped up from the table and headed to the bedroom. "Darling, what's the matter?" I followed her, completely discouraged. But when I got to the bedroom, she locked the door and refused to let me in. Leave me alone." That was all I could get from her. I finally went back to the kitchen, finished making the salad, and took the lasagna out of the oven when the timer went off. "Lisa, supper is ready." I knocked carefully and spoke as warmly as I could, but in response, I only received, "I'm not hungry." So, I opened a Corona and ate dinner alone, half listening to the news on TV and wondering what was bothering my usually cheerful and loving wife. Lisa eventually came out of the bedroom a couple of hours later and ate dinner, but she stubbornly refused to talk to me, let alone explain what was bothering her. When I climbed into bed, I made one last try. "Honey, I have no idea what you're unhappy about. Maybe I did something that made you angry. Please tell me so I can try to make things right. Just leave me alone," was all she said, in a voice full of tears. When, a few minutes later, I heard her crying in the darkness and reached out to her, she angrily pushed my hand away and shouted, "Don't touch me." I didn't touch her, but I went to bed wondering, for the 1000th time, why men couldn't understand women at all. I got out of bed early on Saturday, determined to make Lisa a nice breakfast and try to cheer her up or at least get her to talk to me. We had been married for just under 4 years, and I was completely in love with her. Lisa was gentle, cheerful, a little shy, and very beautiful. She was much more proper than I was, no doubt the result of being the daughter of a preacher from a small Texas town west of San Antonio. But she was also smart, sensitive, and devoted to me. I have to say that no woman I had dated before, and I had several serious girlfriends, made me feel as loved as Lisa did. If it sounds like bragging to say that she adored me, then so be it. She adored me. She made me feel like I was a ray of sunshine in her life every day, and I did everything I could to make her feel the same. I was a happier husband than anyone I knew. Therefore, I was quite puzzled by Lisa's behavior last night, and it was clear from her face when she came down to breakfast that everything that had happened was still going on. Lisa accepted my offer of coffee with only a silent nod and made no comment as I filled a plate for each of us with blueberry pancakes and sausage, her favorite breakfast that I like to make for a special treat. She looked awful, with circles under her eyes and a pained, unhappy expression frozen on her face. She usually liked it when I read her news from the newspaper, so I tried that too. Nothing. Not a smirk, not a snort, not the slightest movement. She seemed less angry than the night before, but sadder. "Lisa, dear, please can we talk about this? Won't you let me know what's bothering you?" She looked at me and shook her head. I almost heard the words, "If you don't know, you idiot, then I certainly won't tell you." Sighing, I stood up to get each of us more coffee. Then I tried again. I asked what was new at her work. Lisa was one of the managers of a specialized flower shop in the city. She was an absolute genius at arranging flowers, and her store did good business with local hotels and 2 nearby hospitals. "Nothing new," Lisa said. I asked if she had heard from her parents lately and wondered if they were coming for the summer. "I don't know." I looked through the newspaper until I found, on page 3 of the Metro section, a tiny piece about a fire in my office and read it to her. Jokingly, I said, "I can't believe Hank and I weren't mentioned. We saved that lady's life. They should give us the keys to the city." "Very funny," she said. More confused than ever, I was determined not to give up. I was racking my brain on how to entertain her. "Oh, I almost forgot," I said. "I was going to tell you about this last night, but then the whole fire thing pushed it out of my head. My cousin Ari Landler, remember, the one who grew up on my street, called me unexpectedly yesterday. She was in town for some conference at the Hyatt, and we had a great chat over lunch. She now lives in Chicago, is married, and has 2 little girls, ages 7 and 4, the cutest kids, judging by the photos." I looked at Lisa and stopped, amazed. Tears were streaming down her face, but she smiled radiantly. Before I could say another word, she came around the table, sat on my lap, put her arms around my neck, and began peppering my face with kisses. "Oh, Tommy, I love you so much," she said, pausing to look me straight in the eyes. Then she kissed me again, moving to the lips and completely capturing my attention. After a couple of minutes, she stood up, still looking at me, and took my hand. "I think I need something," she said and led me to the bedroom. In fact, when we got married, I learned that she didn't know much about night, and her introduction to things like intimate outside the bedroom was purely theoretical. Of course, our night life was pretty vanilla. I was still pretty happy with what I was getting, and that Saturday morning, it was vanilla, just hot vanilla. Lisa was all about me, kissing and touching, stroking my back, telling me how much she loved me. It was the sweetest lovemaking we've ever had. When it was over, we lay together, sweaty, dozing in each other's arms. It was only when she woke up sometime later and started kissing my neck that I decided to ask a question. Lisa, what just happened here? Why were you so upset last night and then suddenly so amorous? Not that I'm complaining, mind you, She shut me up with another lingering kiss and then leaned back, smiling, looking in love and embarrassed. Promise me you won't laugh at me, okay, Tommy? I nodded, and she said, yesterday, I made a delivery to the Hyatt around lunchtime. They ordered 6 large arrangements for a wedding, which was to take place in the afternoon. It was quite an elaborate affair. None of this matters anyway. I had just pulled up and parked the van when I looked towards the entrance, and there you were in the arms of this beautiful brunette. You hugged her for a long time and then kissed her deeply. Then you two talked and laughed for another minute, then you kissed her again, and she went back to the hotel while you got in your car and drove away. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I love you so much, and I thought we were both so happy, and here you are cheating on me with some bimbo. I started crying and it took me almost 20 minutes to pull myself together. Finally, I managed to take the flowers to the hotel, then I returned to the store and said that I needed to leave early. I returned home and cried all day. By this point, I certainly knew what was going on. I held her hand and looked at Lisa lovingly as she continued, I didn't know what to do. I love you so much, but how could I stay with you if you were having an affair? When you came home and said that something special had happened that day, for a split second I thought, thank God, I'm wrong. It's not what I thought. But then you told me about you and Hank in the fire, and I thought you were just making a big deal out of nothing. And this morning, she paused, looking around a little, when you prepared such a delicious breakfast and tried so hard to cheer me up, I thought, well, he still wants to be married to me, otherwise, why would he be so nice? But I knew I couldn't let you see that other woman. And then you told me that she's your cousin, the one you told me so much about, and I felt so happy and like the biggest fool at the same time. Lisa broke off, and there were tears in her eyes again. I consoled her, and we laughed together, and then we made love again, sweetly, and I felt very, very happy. Sounds great, right? A little marital misunderstanding with a happy ending and great makeup night. Nothing to worry about. In fact, a happy memory that Lisa can joke and tease about for years to come. So why, 5 months later, am I sitting in a rented Ford Taurus parked across the street from Lisa's store, trying to find out what she's doing today? How the hell did we get from there to here? As I said, I could not imagine my wife treating me better than Lisa did, so I was hardly a suspicious husband. But about a month after that little mix-up with Ari, things started to happen. Good things, at least at first. To put it bluntly, my life began to improve, and this was not my merit but Lisa's. We went out to dinner one Saturday night, and when we were ready for dessert, Lisa said she wanted to eat it at home. I have a surprise for you, she said quietly, smiling at me. When we got home, she told me to sit in the living room for a few minutes and watch the game or something until she got back. It sounded mysterious but promising. I watched about 1 inning of the Reds losing 8 runs to the Cubs before Lisa came into the room with a tray. What a spectacle. On the tray was some kind of fruit cake, as well as a bottle of champagne and 2 cut glasses. But I hardly paid any attention to it because Lisa looked wonderful. Do you like it? She asked. My jaw dropped, and I just stared at her. Lisa blushed and even trembled a little as if she was trying with all her might to resist the urge to cover herself with her hands. After a moment, I had recovered enough to say, damn right, I like it. This pie looks amazing. Lisa made a mockingly angry face, but I said, and you don't look too bad either, baby. Turn around and let me see the full effect. Her efforts had always been a little half-hearted, but I still enjoyed them. She giggled. Oh, one of the girls at work was talking about the special things she does for her boyfriend, but I won't tell you exactly. I don't want you to run after her. I kissed her. Nothing to worry about, but tell her thank you for me, okay? Soon after that, we had intim. I asked her to leave them on. It was the hottest night of our lives, and I made sure to thank her both that night as we fell asleep and the next morning over a nice, relaxing breakfast. She blushed and said, "I'm just trying to make my man happy." Again, that's the problem, right? A wife in nicely lingerie, a hot night, and the problem? What? That's certainly how I felt at the time, but things continued to happen. About 2 weeks after the Champagne games, Lisa surprised me in the shower. I had spent most of Sunday working in the yard and was tired and sweaty. My hair was full of shampoo, my eyes were closed, and I felt a momentary draft. Then my wife hugged me from behind, pressed her beautiful breasts against me, and kissed my neck. "Is it okay if I help?" she asked. Needless to say, I didn't really think about the answer. No, I'd rather shower alone, was certainly not on my mind. We hugged and kissed, soaped each other, played, and giggled. Again, do you think I answered, "No, thanks"? We had an intim in the shower, and it was fantastic, intense, almost animalistic, unlike anything Lisa and I had done before. I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. I felt Lisa's legs trembling. I turned her around and hugged her, pressing her face to my chest, kissing her hair. We rinsed off the water without saying a word, and then I carefully dried her with a large bath towel, picked her up, and carried her to bed, where we lay down and fell asleep, sweetly cuddling each other. A few days after that, I started hugging and kissing Lisa after dinner and said, "Do you want to have a little fun?" "Sorry, Tommy, I started my period this morning," she said. I started to say, "Okay, honey, it's okay," because she never wanted anything to do with night during her period. But to my surprise, she continued, "How about I take care of you tonight?" She took me into the bedroom, undressed us both, and gave me a wonderful massage, culminating in a gentle hand massage that left me breathless. No fancy tricks like champagne or anything, but she took her time, showed a lot of enthusiasm, and watched my face to see how much I liked it, grinning proudly when she was done. On my way to work the next morning, I thought about it hard. The frequency of our lovemaking had not changed dramatically, perhaps it had increased slightly, but Lisa's openness to new things was amazing. And it was not just openness, she herself took the initiative. Lately, 3 or 4 new pieces of underwear had appeared in our nightlife after Lisa saw how much I loved the red nightie. I also realized that Lisa was not as quiet as she used to be in bed. In the first few months of our marriage, I had to listen carefully for changes in her breathing or small sighs, but lately, she had been sighing and make a sound. What about that night when we were fooling around and she suddenly took me outside to the patio? It was a dark night, but neighbors on both sides could easily hear us. Such behavior was hardly typical for my wife, the daughter of a preacher. By the time I got to work, I was starting to worry. What could better intimate at home mean? Perhaps Lisa simply loosened up as she became more comfortable being my wife and the ties that bound her to her upbringing weakened. But why now? Why so suddenly? We had been together for over 4 years now with a fairly limited intimate repertoire, and I wasn't complaining. Then, within a couple of months, Lisa made the rapid transition from shy to adventurous. As unlikely as it seemed, and as much as I knew she loved me, I couldn't pass up the possibility of an affair. It seemed crazy, I kept telling myself that, but then another part of me responded, "Yeah, okay, but her new intimate adventure is pretty crazy too, isn't it?" I raised this issue with her once or twice after she suggested something new and wild. When I brought it up later that evening, Lisa's reaction seemed a little too funny. "I'm just trying to make my baby happy," she said, smiling at me, but I felt some kind of tension in her eyes, something she wasn't telling me. "I'm already happy, Lisa. You know that, right?" I said. "I mean, you don't have to do anything special for me." She came and sat on my lap, kissing me. "I know I used to be kind of clumsy in bed, and you were so nice to me, so patient. I guess I just decided it was time to, I don't know, spread my wings a little." Something was wrong, I felt it, but I didn't press her further. I just kissed her and told her how much I loved her. But I was uneasy, troubled enough to do something about it. I started paying more attention to Lisa's schedule, what she told me about work every day and what she said about her friends or colleagues. I kept track of who she had lunch with, what days of the week she was often out of the store, and what days she liked night more or less or experimented more or less. After almost 2 months, I came to the conclusion, almost zero. Lisa was never late from work or was late no more than once or twice a month, and then only for half an hour or so. We always hugged when we first met, and she never smelled of intim or a recent shower. I calmly checked the records of our telephone conversations for 2 or 3 months and did not find any mysterious numbers that she called. One night, I went through her purse and the notebook she kept in it and didn't find anything that wasn't supposed to be there. Tuesdays seemed more better than other weekdays. Like many working couples, we had most of our intimate, or at least more relaxed intimate, on the weekend. On weekdays, intimate was more routine and sometimes just quick. But in the past few weeks, Lisa had initiated night most of the time on Tuesday nights, whereas I couldn't remember that happening in the past. Moreover, some of her tricks first appeared on Tuesdays. So, not finding anything better, I focused on this day. I casually asked her as much as I could about her Tuesday work schedule without revealing my suspicions. I called the store several times on Tuesdays to invite her to an impromptu lunch or to discuss dinner plans or even just to say hello. From time to time, I looked in on her, making the excuse that I had business nearby. One day, when I walked in and Lisa was making a delivery, I chatted with Angela, another store manager. I was very reserved, just asking how she was, and so on, and learned that over the past couple of months, Lisa's Tuesday delivery schedule seemed to have increased. I never thought about it before, she said casually. Tuesday isn't usually such a big day, you know, lots of things to do at the end of the week, but lately she seems to be running a lot on Tuesdays. On the way to work that day, I struggled with my feelings. It still seemed completely crazy to me that Lisa would leave me. Nothing in her behavior or attitude indicated that she was bored or angry or felt contempt for me. She was still the loving, even adoring girl I married. On the other hand, something was happening, and I certainly wouldn't be the first unsuspecting husband to find out that his wife was cheating on him. Toward the end of the workday, I knocked on the office door of Bob Matthews, my boss, and talked to him for a few minutes about my schedule. Basically, I asked if I could take a few Tuesdays off and make up the hours by staying late on other days or coming in half-day on Saturday. I explained that I was remodeling the kitchen, and it was difficult to do on the weekends when Lisa was home, much easier during the week when I was alone. I didn't want to insist and ask for the whole day off, but I was a valuable employee, and Bob accepted my request without hesitation. I decided that I would keep an eye on Lisa in the mornings and afternoons until I figured out what she was up to, if anything. I hated renting a car every 7 days, but I didn't see any other way to avoid Lisa noticing me, so I decided to play it safe and pay $35 every week, hoping I wouldn't have to do it for too long. And so it happened. After trying Tuesdays first, I followed Lisa for 3 weeks. At least half the time, she was in the store, working on arrangements, and when she went out in the truck, it was routine deliveries to hotels, hospitals, and sometimes private homes. I wrote down the addresses carefully, but she never went to the same house twice and never left the truck for more than 5 minutes. Was it good news or bad? Was I the crazy, stupid, suspicious husband who saw Bigfoot lurking behind every tree? Was I chasing the Loch Ness Monster? Unfortunately, it didn't take long to find out. Lisa spent most of Tuesday mornings as usual in the store or making deliveries to hospitals, hotels, or sometimes private homes. But there was one house at 238 Sanderson Lane, which she visited 4 Tuesdays in a row. Each time she spent at least an hour there, sometimes an hour and a half, and she didn't deliver any flowers. She just rang the doorbell, waited for the door to open, and went inside. Probably 3 times, or even 2, would have been enough for me, but I just couldn't believe it. I kept thinking it must be something else, something innocent, and I kept coming back. After the 4th time, I just sat there, watching Lisa's van drive a few houses away. I sat and thought, my wife cheated on me, but she loved me, she was crazy about me, and I loved her. But she cheated on me for an hour a week with some guy or woman at a house on Sanderson Lane. It had to be something else, but what? Why did she go there every week and keep it a complete secret? I had been closely following her life, asking her many random questions about her schedule, friends, and work, and she did not give the slightest hint about this regular meeting. Various options ran through my head: aerobics classes, dance lessons, meeting with an old acquaintance. Hell, maybe she was sewing a blanket as a surprise for my birthday. Was she being blackmailed for night? Visiting the child she gave up for adoption at 16? Or the long-lost sister she never knew about? The problem was that none of these innocent explanations convinced me, and the fact that my once-repressed wife was now pushing our intimate boundaries with such fervor brought me back to the worst possible conclusion. She was exploring herself in night with someone else. Out of guilt or a desire to make amends, she brought home all the new tricks that her lover taught her and taught them to me. How do you think I felt about this? At the very least, it made me look at all our fun in a different, much more humiliating light. I realized that I had been sitting there for more than an hour after Lisa left, lost in my gloomy thoughts. A red Miata pulled up to the house, and a tall, gorgeous brunette in skinny jeans and a Miami Heat t-shirt walked up to the door, rang the bell, and disappeared inside. Some guy not only has an intim with my Lisa every Tuesday morning but also has another cookie on the line. Suddenly, all my confusion, all my drifting thoughts and indecision, disappeared. I was furious. I drove straight to Lisa's store, speeding through several yellow and even a couple of red traffic lights. When I walked in, Lisa was standing behind the counter, adjusting some cut flowers in a refrigerated display case. She turned and smiled broadly at me. "Hey, baby, what?" I stepped forward and took her hand, not paying attention to her amazed look. "We're going for a ride. Angela, please excuse Lisa for a moment. It's kind of urgent." "Tommy, wait, what's going on?" She resisted a little while I pulled her towards the door. "You'll see. Let's just go." She resisted, and I pulled harder. Now Lisa, confused and scared, came with me. I opened the rental car door, and she turned around, saying, "Tommy, where's your car?" "This is a rental. I will explain later. Just sit down." She complied, looking at me with fear in her eyes. I pulled the car onto the road and headed back towards Sanderson Lane, my jaw clenching with anger. Lisa made several attempts to talk to me, to get me to tell her what was going on, but all I said was, "You'll see soon." She gave in and sat back, making sure her seatbelt was fastened. I was driving quite aggressively. It wasn't until I turned onto Sanderson Lane that she looked at me and tried again. "Oh, now you know where we're going, right? I think you've driven down this street often enough." She started whimpering. "Baby, I'm sorry. I know I should have told you. It was just..." "What? Maybe I won't be so happy if you have something on the side? I don't consider myself a cuckold." "What?" She stared at me, completely dumbfounded. "Tommy, I don't think you understand." "Is it true?" I exclaimed. "I think I understand, actually. And you will soon see that you are not the only toy of this man if you had any illusions about this." The red Miata was still parked in front of the house, and I pulled over to park right behind it. I jumped out of the car, ran to Lisa to pull her out, and cheerfully walked her along the path to the front door. "Tommy, you are making a big mistake. This is not at all what you think." "Oh, isn't it? Well, we'll figure it out soon." I rang the doorbell, waited 5 seconds, and rang again. I did this 7 times, burning with rage and impatience, before the door opened and an attractive Latina woman in her 30s looked at me curiously. I saw the tall brunette girl from the Miata standing slightly behind her. They were both fully dressed. "Yes, what are you?" "Lisa, hello, honey, is this your husband?" She smiled at me warmly, not at all apologetic or embarrassed. She then turned back to the brunette and said, "See you next week, okay, Monica?" "Of course, Ava." The brunette quickly kissed Ava on the cheek and, throwing a wary glance at me, walked past us, went down the path, and returned to her Miata. "Well," said Ava, turning to me with a smile, "I'm Eva Canella, and you must be Tommy. I've heard so much about you from Lisa. How can I help you?" I was shocked. I'd thought through several possible scenarios in my head, but I hadn't come up with this one yet. Next to me, Lisa giggled slightly, her face a mixture of amusement and fear. "Perhaps I made a mistake," I said hesitantly. "I got the impression that you and Lisa..." I stopped, confused. Ava said, "Why don't you both come in and sit down?" She led us into a room in the back, sat us down, and disappeared without a word, returning almost instantly with glasses of water for each of us. Then she gracefully sat down on the chair opposite us, smiled at me, and said, "Lisa, it seems you haven't told your husband yet." My fists clenched, and Lisa hesitantly took my hand. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't have kept Eva a secret from you, but I was embarrassed, you know." I jumped up, fighting the urge to scream. Having difficulty controlling myself, I exclaimed, "Lisa, what is happening here? What exactly were you and this woman doing in this house every Tuesday morning?" Lisa silently looked at the floor, but before I could yell at her, "Run out of the house," or think about what else I should do, Eva said, "I gave your wife night lessons." As they say in the theater, there was a long silence. Now, you may think that I am the stupidest husband in the world. You probably saw it coming a mile away, but there were many reasons why it hadn't occurred to me, the first being that Lisa, the strict daughter of two extremely strict and religious parents, could no more go and sign up for an intimate lessons than she could get a part-time job as a stripper. It was, as they say, unimaginable. So I sat there frozen in place until Lisa finally raised her face to look at me and said in a quiet voice, "It's true, honey. I just wanted to make you happy." When we returned home, after the conversation with Eva ended, she made it clear that the lessons were only in conversation. When I apologized, she forgave me with a laugh and wished us good luck. We silently returned to the car rental office and then home in my car without saying a word. I walked into the living room, stopping only to open 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator, sat Lisa down opposite me, and said, "Fine, talk to me." Lisa blushed and said, "I'm so sorry, Tommy. I've never kept secrets from you, and I hated keeping the secret, but I was so ashamed." I waited. She said, "Remember when you met your cousin Ari, and I saw you together and took it the wrong way and got so upset?" I nodded, and she continued, "After that, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how upset I was when I thought you cheated on me. I mean, I would just die if I lost you, if someone took you from me. And I realized that." She stood up and snuggled up next to me on the couch, hugging me and resting her head on my chest. I think it was difficult for her to look at me, that I wasn't the wildest, most exciting lover in the world. I was so depressed. Everything made me blush or feel embarrassed, and I didn't want you to be bored with me. So I went online and looked for night therapists and counselors and found Eva. I can show you her website if you want. She has an MSW degree and specializes in intimate issues. I called and talked to her for a long time, and she seemed so nice, so patient and understanding. So I started going to her once a week, and it was, I don't know, kind of a mixture of therapy and how-to lessons. We talked about my upbringing, of course, and the things I did that I didn't feel comfortable with, and after about a month, we started talking about things I could do. I mean nicely things, like having champagne in my mouth while I pleased you, or pretty lingerie, poses, and stuff. During all this recitation, or confession, Lisa pressed her face to my chest. I knew how hard it was for her to talk about this, and in my enormous relief, I simply held her close to me, smiling widely. Suddenly she looked up at me, there was a call in her gaze. "Didn't you like it?" "I mean, what I did, wasn't I a handsome lover for you?" "Yes, you were." "You are," I kissed her. "And I loved it all, every minute. But you know, I also spent a couple of really miserable months worrying, and today I made a first-class fool of myself in front of a completely nice woman I'd never met before." Lisa squeezed me tighter. "I know, and I'm very sorry for all this. But I never thought that you... I mean, how could you think that I would ever cheat on you, Tommy? What do I feel for you?" I know. But night became more and more wild, and I couldn't understand it. It was so unlike you, and that you wanted to try it, and that you even knew about it. We sat hugging each other, and a few minutes later, Lisa stood up, took my hand, and said, "Come with me." It was pure vanilla, no tricks, and it was wonderful. When we had finished and were lying together, smiling, she asked, "Do you want me to stop?" I raised an eyebrow at her, and she replied, "With the tricks, I mean. There are a bunch of others that I talked about with Ava that we haven't gotten to yet. Do you want me to just forget about them?" I pulled her towards me again and kissed her for a long time. Then I said, "No, I don't think you need to do that. How about we start alternating our tricks? I have a couple of things I'd like us to try, and we can mix them with your ideas. Okay? Sounds good, she said, but no other people, okay? She looked at me seriously, and I answered, no other people, ever. Fine, she said and snuggled closer to me. What do you think of our story today? I found the story homey and sweet, unlike the previous stories. What do you think? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.